Welcome to the Daily B Show, episode 115 with Bucky O'Neill. We're going to be chatting about creating world-class transformations. I'm so excited to have
Yes.
Bucky on the show, brother. Bucky is life and business legacy mentor for Soulful Entrepreneurs. I love that term. And he
Yeah.
represents a new generation of personal development services and courses and technologies. And whether
Yes.
you're struggling in your personal life or you're looking to create a passion-based business with transformational products and services, which we all know is what I'm about, and a lot of people on the show are as well,
Yeah.
Bucky and his expert team can definitely help you get those results for what you've been dreaming about. So, Bucky, thank you so much for joining us, brother. I'm looking forward to having you here. And yeah, finally the time has come.
Yeah, man. I'm excited to be here. It's such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. And you're calling in from LA right now.
Yes, Los Angeles, Glendale represent.
Happy
Southern
days.
California. It's good to be, I love connecting with people in Australia. It's been such a I've spent I've spent a few trips there, and it's just been such a pleasure to connect with you guys over there. So I'm just excited to be able to be on the podcast and be able to sharing in this part of the world. It's fucking awesome.
Absolutely. So for
Yeah.
those that maybe aren't aware of what you're up to or what I just divulged, can you give a bit of an overview as to the impact you're having, the message you're delivering, and the work that you're doing at the moment, brother?
Sure, absolutely. I spent a lot of years traveling all over the world and being a speaker. And, what I learned from those years is probably about 15, 16 years doing that. And what I learned from those years is that there's a system to transformation. There's a science of transformation. And, one of the things that all the great speakers and, presenters understand is they understand this step-by-step process. And if you want to create transformational experiences, in changing the world or changing lives or creating an impact or creating a long-lasting business in this industry called personal development, wealth development, business development, health development. If you want to create a lasting impact, then transformation needs to be at the top of your priority. And it's great because again, there's a science to it. There's a step-by-step process. And over the last 20 years or so, I've been exposed to that. And what I'm helping people do is a lot of different things. So it depends on where you're at in your business. You can just be getting started, right? A lot of people are in the idea phase. They're like something that they're really passionate about. They want to change people's lives. They know that they're supposed to be doing this thing, but they don't know where to get started. I help people with that, monetize their passion. I also help people who are in a one-on-one coaching business. They're doing well, and they're like, okay, I want to go into courses. I want to develop courses, online group training programs. How do I do that? How do I break down my processes and leverage my time? So, and here's the conflict that those people face. They face that conflict of one-on-one, I'm really good, but I don't know if I can maintain that same level of result without me being totally present the entire time. So how do I do that? How do I break down my processes and make sure that they're still going to bring people towards that outcome? And then the last thing, and this is kind of more of the big picture thing for a lot of different people, I work with different experts, different influencers, different speakers, and help them to design their live event funnel. So whether that's the preview to the 2-day, into the week-long, into the certification, or the year-long mentorship, whatever that looks like, I help them to break that entire thing down, scale the whole thing, coach them in the facilitation, coach them in the event orchestration, coach them in the content development, and what it all looks like from a step-by-step kind of standpoint, so that they can make sure that they're producing the best programs in their industry on the planet.
Fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, yeah,
And the thing that gets me excited is that this is a path that I've been just been born into really not too long ago, and to connect with people like yourself so early on in this journey just gives me affirmation that there's so many people out there that are doing great work, that have got the proven results, predictable results, and able to translate that and transfer that onto other people, essentially becoming the hero at the end of the journey that's helping other people go on that adventure within to find those impactful, tangible sort of ways of being, and like you said, the transformative processes that are just predictable.
yeah, yeah. It's amazing. It's
Fantastic.
amazing to be a part of that. Yeah,
So I'm excited to hear as well. Like just before we jumped on, we're speaking a little bit about how
yeah,
the journey is what it is, and there's always ups and downs and roundabouts. And I'd love to hear from yourself a little bit about your journey and some of the trials and tribulations that you had to go to, that were really the impactful epiphanies, or the deep inner work that you had to go through, and the pain you had to feel to get to where you are now. Just to show people as well, like you said, some people are starting off with an idea or even not knowing what they're passionate about, but
sure.
what it took to get from where you were back then in that stage to sort of where you are now and what you're doing.
Sure. Yeah. It took years and years and years of experience, I would say. I can go back to the early years of growing up in, first of all, I grew up with a father who was a, professional speaker, and he was hosting workshops and kind of doing a similar thing to what I was doing, to what I am doing now. So I grew up around that environment. It was my kind of family culture. There's one of these things that I was very well aware of. And at the same time, as a very young person, I struggled with self-identity and this idea of, I was telling the story earlier on one of my Facebook pages, this idea of experiencing myself as something different, looking the way I looked. I grew up in San Diego in a predominantly white neighborhood, pretty well-to-do neighborhood. But I remember in the second grade, it was the first time that I recognized that I was quote unquote different. And years of that on a very subtle level started to build up. And even through high school and through college, there was a huge inner conflict. And I think one of my greatest passions, and this is one of the things that I often say, is that, our greatest passions are birthed from our greatest pains, and our greatest contributions are birthed from our greatest challenges and our greatest traumas. So that whole thing on, everyone's looking for their message, right? This idea of where do I find my message from? I would say, definitely look into your life experience, because that is your expertise. If I look at my life experience, it was littered with a bunch of suppression, a bunch of emotional disconnection, a bunch of lack of identity, fear to be myself, fear to know myself, pretending to be different people with different groups of people, and getting further and further and further away from my truth, to a point where I was introduced to a personal development program. It was one for students. I was about 16 years old. I went to this program called Super Camp, and I was a student at that program, and it literally caused a shift. It didn't change my life. It shifted some things, though. It brought a different level of awareness to who I was, and it allowed me to start putting the pieces together. I then became a youth mentor at 18. I did that from 18 to 24. When I graduated college at 24, I then became a facilitator, and then a lead facilitator the following year. And then I've been doing that for 13, 14 years. But life, just like business, just like everything, is an unfoldment, right? So to really find your message and to really find your truth and to really discover who you are, there's a constant and never ending unfoldment. I can go back to different times in my life, whether it was getting divorced, or starting a new business, or watching a business collapse, or shifting a business, or starting a new family. The constant unfoldment of who we are in our lives is also the constant unfoldment of who we are in this thing called soulful entrepreneurship. So those things are echoed, those things are mirrored. There is no separation. A lot of times when people think about business, they sometimes think about the separate category of who they are, right? It's oftentimes, like, this is my business, this is my family, this is my health, this is my wealth. There's like different categories. The truth about it is when you live in a life of alignment, they're all interconnected. There is no separation, and you can't disassociate. So what I call soulful entrepreneurship is this idea of doing what you love for a living, or doing what you're meant to do for a living, and monetizing that passion, monetizing that purpose, monetizing that gift, right? And actually putting a business behind it. And what starts to happen is that there is no separation, and my personal development, my spiritual evolution is directly influenced, or directly shows up in my business. And I use my business as a point of leverage, to get into that work that I wouldn't necessarily get to without that leverage, right? So my livelihood, my kids' livelihood, the roof over my head, the food that I eat, my ability to live the way that I live is dependent on my ability to go deeper and deeper and deeper into the trauma, into the alignment, into the truth about who I am. And the more that I can express that, the more that I can formalize that, the more that I can position that as a gift as compared to a trauma or a challenge, the more service that I can have, the bigger impact that I can have, the bigger business I can grow, the bigger influence that I can be, and the more transformation that I can create, not only in my life, but also in the lives of others. So it's an ongoing, right? And I know this, right? And I can tell you thousands of stories of all the different moments where I felt like, fuck, who am I? And the years and years of practice, whether it was meditation, or living in Bali for 5 years, or traveling all over the world, or doing solo vacations, or living in my van, like, the exploration of the self, to find yourself, has been my greatest passion. And I've just noticed that there's so many different ways to do it. And at the center of really what I do, it's really about finding yourself and being in the greatest expression of who you are. All the stuff, the business, the coaching, the group programs, the speaking, that's all greater expressions of who we are. And that's all it is. And at the center of that, you have to realize that who you are, you're the person that's running that show. You're the person that's running that business. And if you're not in that work, there's a very big disconnect. And last thing I want to say about that is that, I know this, it's an infinite ascent. There is no end game, right? If you're going to be constantly in this game, if you're going to constantly be in the unfoldment of who you are, you have to realize that it's an infinite ascent, right? There is no mountaintop where you're going to be like, fucking, I did it, right? There's just progress. There's just progress and a yearning to be fuller and more expressed and more out loud and more brash and more abundant and more, loving and more, connected. There's just an expression. I remember a few years ago, I made a decision like 3-4 years ago, right at the time that I was going to get my divorce. And I was married for 8 years prior to that. It was like, for me, I made a commitment to level up in all the areas of my life. And at the time I was thinking mental, physical, emotional, financial, social, spiritual. How do I level up? How do I take it all to the next level? And as I took that step, as I made those shifts and I watched everything magically orchestrate, I quickly realized that, man, there's so much more to go. And what a joy and an opportunity that we all have in order to be able to step into that work and to step into that expression and to step into that emotion and allow it to unfold and to be the beautiful expressions of who we are. For me, that's living.
Yeah,
that's what living is, and that's the game that we're in.
Yeah, beautiful, and I love it. And it's so it's such an amazing experience from what I remember as well, is getting to that epiphany where you think you need to solve this problem or improve this area of your life, and so you go on this hunt and this search to try and do that.
Yeah.
But then you sort of awaken to that. Just what you're saying is that it's infinite ascension. So it's like, oh, okay, like I'm fucked, and it's always going to be that way. It's always going to be another level to reach up and to level up to.
Yeah.
And then it just turns into the game. It's like, all right, love and gratitude for where I'm at right now, everywhere that has come before me, and just what's ahead of me. What's the next hill to climb? It's an infinite. I heard the metaphor the other day. People think enlightenment is like this one big mountain to climb to ascend to the top of it, but it's more so an infinite array of mountains everywhere that you continue. People are climbing all sort of different ones all over the place. It never ends. So it's beautiful.
I think a big part of that is that we're all multifaceted, right? We try to separate certain parts of us and say, hey, this is my business, my family, and this is how I'm growing. We're all multifaceted, and it's really an expansion and expression. There's a sweet spot, speaking of the terms enlightenment, I'm not necessarily an expert by any means, but there's been times where I have felt a deep level of connection beyond the self, beyond explanation, beyond, reason. And I would say, that piece on, so many of us are focused on where we're going and where we've been. We're focused on here's the things that I'm dealing with, and whether it's a conscious or subconscious thing, right? But this idea that I'm constantly making decisions from my past, I'm constantly operating and choosing and reacting and interacting based on my past experience, based on my conditioning. Or I'm always focused on the future. Where am I going? Where am I going? Where am I going? How do I get there? What are the next steps?
Yeah.
The sweet spot for me has always been, how do I get into the present moment? How do I get present in the things that are going on for me right now? How do I get present in my relationships? How do I get present in my business? How do I get present with my clients? How do I get present with myself? For me, there's been so much time that I've spent trying to avoid that. I think emotionally trying to avoid that. I think mentally trying to avoid. But there's been time when I've looked at my bank account and be like, I'm trying to avoid it. I look at my credit card statements. I'm trying to avoid it.
Just because of the pain, my business. Why do you find you were trying to avoid it?
Well, I think at different times, right? At different times, depending on where you're at. I think for me, I had an expectation of where I wanted to be and where I was actually at.
Yeah.
And part of the enlightenment for me is about, how do you come into where you actually are? Let go of the facade, let go of the story, let go of the ambition, and just come into what's real. And be in the realness of it, so that you can then shift it, or that you can then decide how to move.
Yeah.
Which direction to move from.
It's like how you express yourself. Like you said before, everything's just an expression of where you're at. And so I've found that when you get to that point, that present moment, then you get to choose how next you want to express yourself in that present moment. So you don't have that stress about not being where you think you need to be, or scared of the fears or the traumas that you had in the past, maybe reliving them. But it's like, all right, now I get to choose. Like, what am I going to choose to express myself like in this very moment?
Yeah.
So do you have processes or a specific thing that you might do to really help you get in that present?
Yeah, I think everybody, as a baseline to everybody's work, if you're an entrepreneur or if you're someone who just wants to be successful, quote unquote, successful or productive or produce amazing things in your life, that you have to discover what your baseline practice is. And what I mean by that is, what are the things that bring you home? What are the things that bring you to center? And for everybody, it's going to be a little bit different, right? Nature, journaling, conferences, speaking, working out. Like there's all kinds of different examples. When it comes down to it, it's the basic conversation around state management. How do I best manage my state?
Yeah.
How do I move away from the illusion and get with what's present? And the easiest way to do that is physical. I change my environment. I do something with my body. I move in a way that allows me to experiencing life in a different way, or ask myself a better question, right? There's all kinds of different things that we can shift. But the question is, for you, where do you feel the most at home? Where do you feel the most connected? Where do you feel the most grounded? And making sure that you have a steady diet of that, especially as you're looking to grow, because the growth is the unstable part, right? The growth is the challenge part. The growth is where everything comes up, and it's going to challenge you to go back into those two places, whether too far in the future or too far in the past. Mm-hmm. And how do you stay present? How do you stay present in all those things so that you can actually make a decision from a real place, not an illusionary place?
Okay, I love it. One thing that's coming to me is I think it was actually, before I go there, can we just segue into sort of what drew us together as well? You being named after Bucky Ford.
Totally.
I have
totally.
the Trim Tab Transformation Foundation.
Yeah.
So
yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's great. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about Bucky, because he's still underground and unknown in a lot of circles, and he's obviously had a big impact on your life and as well on mine. So would you mind sharing a little bit about that and the impact that his teachings and principles have had?
Yeah. I think the biggest one for me has just been, around this word called integrity and what that actually really means. For a lot of people measure integrity as like the simple version, right? What is it? They look at virtues and they look at values. And for most people, they look at it societal integrity of like honesty and doing the right thing and speaking the right,
morality,
abiding by the law or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Or you can take it a deep step further and you say, okay, well, my actions and my values, are they in alignment? That's kind of a simple way to look at it. Are my actions and values in alignment? I think Bucky's definition of integrity was a lot deeper than that. It had to do with really the work that we do, which is really about this soul's purpose, or like this design contribution is what I call it, right? And I believe that we live just like Bucky in a communicative universe, and that we're always in that relationship, and that internally and externally we're always in communication. And there's an infinite intelligence and an infinite wisdom that is guiding us, and life, and quote unquote life, is working for us in that way. And our ability to pay attention to those things and also align with our highest truth. A lot of people call that dharma from a spiritual perspective, or other people in Hawaii, they call it kuleana. It's like this level of duty or responsibility that's associated to who you are beyond the experience as Bucky or as Matt. Mm-hmm. But, the infinite intelligence that's within you, and your ability to align with that and to choose with that and to act with that and to fulfill that. I think that's been one of the biggest ones. The other one is about processional effect, the benefits of processional effect and how it works. I think for a lot of people, so many people are caught up with purpose. How do I get aligned with my purpose? What's my purpose? What's my purpose? And they don't realize, that by leading in their truth or standing in their passion, that they're working out their purpose. And the processional effect is really what that's about. And I love the name of the show with the Daily Bee. And I'm guessing that there's a strong association to processional effect with that bee. Yeah. And going back to how we met, it's so crazy, because I was telling this story, but my dad forever still does, has an AOL email with Trim Tab 2000. I think it's Trim Tab 2001. That's awesome. It's like, so I've just seen that forever. And then I saw it and I was like, oh my gosh, let me reach out to that. But that in itself, right? So that in itself, the Trim Tab, there's been so many, so much of what's being taught today in personal development and business stems from Buckminster Fuller. So much stems from that school of thought, because that ability to align with who we are, that ability to make the pivots or to make the shifts in our lives and our business, to get into alignment, the ability to stand in our integrity, to be in our purpose, to let go of the rationale or the needing to know what our purpose is, but just to stand in our truth and to let it unfold. A lot of that is the conversation of Buckminster Fuller. And I believe that Buckminster Fuller is probably, he tells the story in different ways, but I would imagine that if he was living today, one of the ways that he would tell his story of how he got to be who he was that he had a moment with death, right? He had a moment where he got to see things that was beyond his experience, and he had a download. If he was a spiritual woo-woo type, he's like, I had this download, man. I had this download, and I knew that this was going to happen. I remember having moments like that. I remember the first time when I became a speaker. It was like my second year as speaker. I was a lead facilitator. Then I was like speaking in front of a group of my of my colleagues, all professional speakers, are probably about 70 of us.
Yeah.
And I remember like going on stage and be like, okay, cool, I'm gonna establish my authority, establish my position, and all that kind of stuff. And it was shortly during that training, it was like a 4.5-day training, that afterwards, I've had a couple of different moments like that, but I just had to lay down in the back room and I felt like really sick. And I remember afterwards going to my parents and having this huge conversation about them, about like, I don't know what happened, but I just feel like I have access to information that I've never been exposed to. I feel like I don't ever have to read another book again. I feel like I've touched something within myself. I've touched a knowing without knowing. I don't know if you ever remember that book or that movie, The Last Dragon. Barry Gordy's The Last Dragon. Okay. For me, it was like an all-time classic. One of these things that I used to listen to and watch all the time as a kid. And one of the biggest moments in the beginning of the film is he talks about this understanding of he knew without knowing. He knew without knowing. He knew what it was without knowing. And I think for Buckminster Fuller and a lot of people who are, obviously it's interesting to have a pioneer at a time where he's pushing progressive. But now, I feel like we're in a day and age where people are, where the consciousness of the planet is, for a lot of different reasons, is that people are having those awakenings pretty regularly. And that level of awareness has shifted, right? I remember back in 1990, in the 90s and even the early 2000s, like what a push it was to inform people around personal development, and what a challenge. You really had to convince them of a lot of the metaphysical stuff. And just because the nature of information, as an example, where you'd have to go certain places and be in certain networks and read certain books in order to get certain information, the abundance of information and the access of information has shifted a lot of ways the consciousness and people's ability and willingness to think differently than quote unquote the status quo. And a big part of the normalizing has come about this awakening to the higher self and what it looks like to live out the higher self. And I think that there's a massive paradigm shift that's going to happen. It's already happening when it comes to people standing in their truth and reshaping business industry and how commerce is done. And I think it's already taking place. So, that's a little bit of a rant on Bucky, but it's been a massive influence in my life. And honestly, when I was growing up, it was just kind of like, it was almost like a folklore. I didn't actually know too much about it. And it was me having to do the work and be in the work. And as I started to work around people who knew Bucky really well, they're like, wow, man, I'm so happy that you're carrying on that legacy. Yeah. And I was like, I'm just doing my thing, right? I'm just, I'm just living in that truth. And then like, it's so cool that you're living that on. And that's something that you're called to do, because it's definitely in line with his message. So.
Yeah, can you explain the processional effect as well for those that haven't heard of it as well? Because that's huge. Yeah.
Processional effect, and one of the things that I'll do if you follow me, I'll post another one on Facebook, but every once in a while I'll do one of his pieces. Processional effect is essentially the ripple effect, right? It's what we know today as the ripple effect, but there's a science behind it, right? And the metaphor that they give is they give the bee to pollen. Okay, sorry, excuse me, the bee to nectar. So one of the things that he'll ask in the beginning is, well, what are bees famous for? Okay, or how do bees make honey, right? Or what do bees go to the flower for? A lot of people say, oh, they go for, pollination, right? Long story short, bees are known for pollination. A lot of people would say that is their purpose on the planet. It's one of the reasons why I just saw on Facebook they're deemed the most important being on the planet are bees, right? Because pollination is what, how all food grows, right? It happens through pollination. But the consciousness of the bee is not about pollination. The consciousness of the bee and the passion of the bee, quote unquote, passion of the bee, is really about nectar, right? So what they're doing as they go to each flower is they're looking for this nectar, and the byproduct of that is pollination. That's the ripple effect. And if you could see it visually, right, you could see this action, and one would say that the nectar in our lives is like our passion. It's like that thing that drives us, that things that if we could do anything for free, if we can make a living doing anything, we would do this thing. And that action actually leads to the processional effect of our greatest purpose. And for the most of that greatest purpose is beyond our awareness. It's like the bee. The bee has no idea about pollination. Like it's not even like it's not even in the stratosphere, right? It's like not even an awareness of theirs. But what they do know is they know nectar. They know nectar. Mm-hmm. Now, what's interesting about bees versus humans is that bees are, there's like there's a design there. For humans, we have this thing called free will, right? So we can always choose to be away from our nectar. We can always choose to ignore our nectar. And that shift that I was talking about within the planet and individuals is that people, that nectar signal is getting louder and louder, and that nectar permission to be in our nectar, to be in the expression of who we are, is getting louder and louder. And one of the biggest things for me in shifting the consciousness of the planet is allowing people, like you said, to actualize, to realize what that is. Not only realize what it is, but to actualize that, to turn it into something that they're acting out. And by doing so, creating a bigger processional effect and a collective processional effect that then shifts a lot of things for humanity.
Beautiful. It's so powerful. Like, it blew me away when I first sat down with Marshall, who studied with Bucky, and I was probably 22. Basically, my nectar at the time was getting pissed and going partying on the weekends, and I just ran into the boys that were organising this. And to be sitting there in amongst CEOs and executives that have flown to Australia from all over the world, sitting at the back of the class and learning these processes and these understandings and these lessons, it blew me away. I was in a sales job for the telephone company, just selling telephone plans, and then to take that information to go back to my job throughout the week and see what was going on, and just to see how the world around me was behaving. Like you said, integrity, like when you get exposed to that level of integrity and you're amongst the people that are living up to that standard and really following their nectar, being in their nectar and having that effect on their wider surrounding, it is phenomenal. It's profound to be in that group of people that are vibrating and raising up at that sort of level. So for me, it has left a lasting impression. When I meet people that are on that same path, it just hits me for 10. I'm just drawn to them like a bee to the nectar. And it's just I just am so drawn to sharing and pollinating the world with this information so other people can have those epiphanies and those profound awakenings that I was able to get at such a young age. And yeah, man, I'm just inspired by people like yourself that are out there doing it and living it and breathing it as well.
Awesome.
To sort of pave the path for myself and other people like me to follow suit as well. So it's great.
And I think, let me just say one thing about that. I think we're all on that path towards nectar. We're just either ignoring it or suppressing it, or we don't think we can do it, or we don't think it's good enough. But everybody, for me, everybody that I ever met, everybody that I ever spoke to has this level of nectar within themselves. They have this thing that they love, have this thing that they want to chase, have this, intuitive sense of things that they want to do. And they're either on that path or they're off that path, right? So one of the things that you said my nectar was getting pissed with the boys. And I would say that your nectar was probably covered up with a bunch of stuff. Right? It was probably hidden from a lot of things, and your way of dealing with it, or your way of normalizing things, was like, oh, I'm just going to do what everyone else does. I'm just going to get pissed all the time. But, the only reason why you do that is, there's a social connection. But for me, I think with that level of habituation to like get to that level of like actually being pissed, like there's something that you're suppressing. There's something that you want to ignore. There's something that there's a part of you that, either you only get to show it when you're like that, or you get to ignore it when you're like that. And it's a way for you to escape at some point. Right. And for me, sobriety has been one of these crazy things. And it's only been like 3 years. But sobriety has been really one of these things. There's times in my life where I could never think about, oh, you're not going to drink, or you're not going to have a beer, or whatever it is. But it's been, to realize that was an association to me, and to let that go so that I can actually be in the alignment of who I am. I can actually stand in my integrity. I can actually know what that is. I can develop that sensory acuity to say, okay, these are the things that go on for me around these moments, right? And again, it's an infinite ascent, right? So what I want to say about that is everybody has nectar, whether they're aware of it or not. And if you are aware of it, if you have a consciousness of what your nectar is, it is then your responsibility, right? It's your kuleana, it's your dharma, it's your absolute must. It is that you must live it out, right? And life is, if yes or no, but this is what Bucky would teach, life is going to give you feedback based on your ability or inability to live that out. So as you stand into alignment, there tends to be a level of energy, a level of flow, a level of unfoldment, a rapid ascension into the things that you want. As there's disalignment, you experience pain, you experience trauma, you experience difficulty, you gain weight, you have bad relationships, you have poor interactions, right? There becomes this feedback. And a lot of people look at the external world as just the external world, but don't realize there's a communication that's taking place. And if we can embrace the communication, we don't have to experience the higher levels of that trauma. We don't have to experience what he would call the Mack truck or the 2x4. We don't have to experience, that near death experience. We don't have to experience that debilitating health experience. We don't have to experience that, right? Learn to listen to the whispers so you don't have to hear the screams. Learn to listen to the whispers and pivot, trim tab, so that you can constantly be shifting and adjusting and getting to that higher level of alignment so that your life can beautifully unfold as it was designed to.
Absolutely.
Right? This is that work. That's that Buckminster Fuller work.
That's beautiful. and you can see the passion oozing out as well. Like when we get onto that, it's obviously largely what is intertwined with what you're doing, the impact you're having on people, and just living to get your own feedback in your day-to-day process as well. And I think that is, again, what I'm sort of coming to feel and see more and more and more is just being in the present moment is just so enjoyable, because it's all about just getting that feedback loop and being in action, being in a space of choosing how to express, and just watching the feedback come back, and just continue to align or realign or adjust or reiterate. Just to keep getting yourself further and further on path and finding out more and more about who you are. It's deep and it's full on. You need a tissue box on your side from time to time, but you get there.
Totally. And it is the greatest attribute that you can bring to your business. Mm-hmm. It is the greatest work that you can do in your business. It's the greatest work that you can do in your life, really. Mm. And a lot of people, when they talk about, starting a transformational business or being a coach or being a healer or being a mentor, it really goes back to this work, and it really goes back to your ability to get into this work. And it is where your expertise, your message, your content, your entire business will derive from. So many people want to reach outside of themselves, just like, the metaphor is the same, right? We see this external world. We want to produce this external result, and we think we got to reach outside of ourselves in order to do that. I want to be successful. I want to gain a lot of money. Let me start a business around whatever that person's doing because they're making a bunch of money. Yeah. It's not that game. This soulful entrepreneurship, doing what you love for a living, is not that game. And you can do market research and you can replicate some things, and at the end of the day, you will never be the best version of somebody else. So the game is, who am I? Who am I? What is my nectar? What is my sweet spot? Right? And how do I stay in that lane and develop an entire business around that? Develop entire curriculum and processes around that. Right? And serve the people that actually need that. This is the other thing that people say. I want to serve everybody. I want my processional effect to be for everyone, right? First of all, you don't get to determine what your processional effect is for, right? You might have an insight, right? You might say, okay, this is kind of how I want it, but you'll never know. You'll never know the true impact of the work that you're doing. You'll never know when you're living in your nectar, you're living in your passion. You'll never know the true impact that you're having. What you do get to know is that this is my nectar, this is my passion, and regardless of the feedback or regardless of my perception of the feedback, good, bad, indifferent, awesome, excellent, outstanding, whatever it is that you still stand in that truth. You still stand in that truth, and that again is the perpetual work, because, people starting a business, I'm going to start doing social media posts and then, oh man, I get 25 views. Oh, maybe it's the wrong message. Right. Yeah. But that's your truth. That's your nectar. Right. Or, oh man, I'm getting 100,000 views. Oh man, I'm going to keep on doing that. I'm going to try to do something. I'm going to innovate this. Yeah. Right. There becomes all kinds of moments where, better example, I got 100,000 views. I'm crushing it right now, but it's not translating into a deep transformation. Mm-hmm. Right. That's, the apathy of 100,000 views without actually changing people's lives. Is a kind of a better example of that. Yeah. So, at the end of the day, it's like, who are you? What is it that you're looking to create in the world? And what is it that is your dharma or your truth? And how do you just follow that through? How do you take the step-by-step action in order to actually have that be fulfilled in your life? Yeah.
And there's processes and sequences that you can go through to really hone in and identify that, because that's easy to say. But when you've been conditioned for years and years and suppressed for years and years and cover things up, it takes a lot of work and on the daily to really uncover that and to continue to recognize the alignment, because it changes as well.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily take a lot of work. It just takes the right type of work.
Yeah.
Okay, so this facade around, oh, it's going to take me lots of work. It's so much work, right? It's just the right type of work, and it's the right type of eye, right? It's like, all this stuff that we're talking about is all stuff that's hiding in plain view. It's not stuff that's, far off from the things that we need to discover. It's like right within our awareness right now. Like we are like literally a question away from it. And it's the right type of work. One of the things that you got to be able to do is you got to put yourself in the right environments, the right communities, in the right mentorships, in the right programs, in the right situations where you can have clearer reflection of who you are. A clear reflection of who you are. Why is a firewalk so powerful? Because it gives you a clear reflection of who you are. Why is a course so powerful? Because it gives you a clear reflection of who you are. Why is business so powerful? Because it gives you a clear reflection of who you are. We have a hard time seeing ourselves in our lives. We have a hard time gaining perspective. We're so caught up in all our stuff that we have a hard time seeing ourselves. And it's when we get to truly see ourselves and where we're at, where we're stuck, where we're challenged, where we're, in those difficult moments that we have the opportunity to transform them. Right. But that is an experiential thing. That is a process-based thing. And this is kind of going into the science of transformation in a little bit, is understanding that there's processes, right? The beginning stages of transformation, let's say beginning to middle, is around the awareness of what is, the awareness of where I'm at, the awareness of the choices that I make, the awareness of the decisions and the emotional well-being that I come from, the awareness of the environment so that I can make a different choice, and noticing that as I move differently, that greater awareness of how things are different. Beyond feeling, like you belong, that you can take a risk, that there's a level of community there. The first couple stages of that is awareness of who I am and putting myself in situations and environments and dynamics and processes where I get to see myself as I am.
Yeah.
All of it. And then the opportunity to explore, of course.
Yeah.
Well, it takes willingness. It doesn't necessarily take courage, right? Because here's the thing, from an events perspective, from a process perspective, I can design a process that is going to bring you through a gradient, right? It's like a staircase.
Yeah.
How do you get to the top of a staircase? Well, one step at a time.
Yeah.
Does it take courage to take one step? No, it doesn't. Right? But does it take courage to stand at the top of the staircase? Yeah, if you do it in a single leap. But if I'm crafting transformation, and here's the thing to understand about transformation, it's two parts. One is design, right? Or crafting, and the other one is orchestration. Okay. Right? But if I'm crafting transformation in a way that's step by step, you're just constantly be taking these little steps. And it's not going to feel like you have to be courageous in order to do it. You just have to be willing to take one step. It's the willingness to step. Yeah. The willingness to step into the unknown, one step at a time. And if you're in a well thought out process, a well designed, a well orchestrated process, it should feel like ease. It should feel like ease. It shouldn't feel like, oh, this is so hard. It should feel like, wow, this is really fun. This is really awesome. I'm really enjoying this. Yeah. And I would imagine that the biggest transformation that anybody on here has come from that. Oh my God, this is so fun. The adventure of the travel, the falling in love, the working out your physical body. Right? There's an excitement. There's an exploration that's associated to it. Not like oh shit, this is going to be really fucking hard.
Yeah.
Right.
So is that something that you recognize certain coaches and trainers doing, is creating this persona of needing to do hard work, or that it's going to be big leaps compared to other people like yourself that have got the processes and are able to present what you're doing and the potential outcomes and transformations with ease and enjoyment and fun as well, that has more of an appeal to people to actually start or exercise that willingness to begin the journey?
Yeah, I think the perception of hard work is a little bit mislabeled. Okay, the hardest work that you're going to do in your life is getting out of your own way. That's the hardest work you're going to do. Okay, and when you can get out of your own way, and when you can step into your alignment, then it's fun. It's exploration. Yes, it's work. Yes, it's dedication. Yes, it's putting in the hours, doing the push-ups, right? No one can do the push-ups for you, but it's driven from a space of exploration, passion, and fun and expression. Mm-hmm. It's not driven from a place of like, oh, I got to pay this bill. Yeah. Or driven from a place of like, oh, I got to go home to this person.
Yeah.
right? It's driven from a place of passion. And when you're leading with passion in your life, then first of all, the energy changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And second of all, the level of enjoyment and the level of expression. A big part of us as human beings is about this piece of expression, this ability to express, this ability to grow, this ability to give,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's a huge driving force for us. And as you step into that, things can be work. I mean, every single day, first of all, I have 3 kids. Okay. I got 3 businesses, 2 kids. 3 businesses and 3 kids. And honestly, to be able to do all that, it takes a lot of energy.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of passion. It takes a lot of direction, to have that balanced life. Like I grew up in a situation where I felt like my father was always gone because he was, right? And I found myself recreating that life for myself. Right? I told you I was on the road 8-9 months out of the year. And I thought my paradigm was that I had to make a choice, that I had to choose family or career.
Okay.
The hardest thing I ever had to do was get out of my own way. Okay. That wasn't the truth.
Yeah.
But it was hard for me to let go of that, right? Because I built my whole life based on that understanding, right? So the hardest thing I had to do was to let go of that, right? This other thing, I was married for 8 years, right? And my parents have been married for 42 years. It was in my paradigm that that relationship, marriage was about this. It was about compromise. It was about sacrifice. It was about the relationship first, you second.
Yeah.
That's not the truth.
No.
That's not my truth. That's not what my truth was. But the hardest thing I had to do was get out of my own way, right? And I struggled. That was the hard work, trying to figure out how can I get out of my own way, where my truth was sitting right there. I just was unwilling to get out of my own way and choose it. And it wasn't until I was able to get out of my own way where I said, you know what? Enough's enough. It's time for me to start living from this place, that my whole life transformed. My whole business transformed. My relationship, my family grew out of nowhere, literally. Out of nowhere. And the most beautiful family I could ever imagine for myself. I couldn't plan it any fucking better. I never even could have planned it this way. But the hardest thing for me to do was to wrestle with myself and get out of my own way. When I got out of my own way, it was easy. It was fun. It was adventurous. And yes, is there hard times? Is there challenging times? Is there learnings? Of course. But when you're driven by passion, that's all it is. It's just learning. It's just growth. It's just exploration. Right? We can't be attached to this outcome all the time. We have to realize that there's an unfoldment, and based on the idea that everything is working for us, then there's clearly things that I have to get about the lessons that are being placed in front of me. And how do I get into the present moment and be with those lessons so I don't have to repeat them, and I can learn the lesson and move forward so I can take it to the next level and keep on doing what I love and sharing this with more people.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that was one of a little bit more crass and a little bit more raw, but when someone came to me and said, Matt, you don't have to believe yourself all the time. You can tell yourself you're full of shit just like you think other people are from time to time. It's like, oh yeah, it's like I've believed everything that went on up in here. It's like, oh well, it's coming out of my mind. I'm thinking surely there must be some truth to it. It's like, hang on, just like that guy over there is full of shit. I'm full of shit sometimes, and I don't have to believe that. And just allowing those thoughts and those belief systems to just be observed and pass through and be questioned as well. It was a big step. It's
huge.
It's pretty full on.
It's the step, and it's ongoing. It's ongoing. If you're really going to do this work at a very high level, if you're really going to be, this type of leadership as well, it demands it of you. If you want to be a quote unquote transformational leader, I did when I wrote in this post, I talked about this word of transformation and how it's become such a buzzword, right? But if you really want to align with what that word means, that you really have to be willing to do the work. It will not allow you to do it otherwise. You cannot lead in this space unless you're willing to work in this space. And you're willing to really stand up and live and embody the end result, because you can never bring people to places that you haven't gone yourself. So if you're a transformational healer, if you're a transformational coach, if you're a transformational business, if this is a transformational event, you need to be for sure 100% that at the very least that you've done that work. Because only when you've done that work can you actually suggest that you bring people through it. Right? Ideally, you will have done that work with yourself and for years and for years and for years before you're making that claim, because it's a very high claim to make. You can make it, but you got to be willing to do the work. right?
Well, it's not, you don't really have a choice if if whatever you're putting out there is going to come back to you in in the form that that's needed for you. So
Right.
yeah, it's sort of a double-edged sword. You can put yourself out there as much as you want, but you'll get the lessons. Whether you decide to take
Right.
them on or not is another situation,
Right.
another question. But
Right.
yeah, it's full on. And I think one thing that I've I guess not taken for granted, not the right term, but I've just maybe forgotten at times the profundity of some of the epiphanies and transformations that I've gone through.
Yeah.
And then again, being in my own way, being like judging myself, not wanting to um, talk down to people or, preach to the choir about certain things that I just feel are common knowledge, but actually are so profound when they hit me and shifted me and transformed me at certain points that recognizing that there are so many people that um, are still on their journey, that there's like the people behind you and you're where you're at, and there's the people in front of you that you're sort of looking towards and you're modeling and your journey. But I think what I'm seeing is, and definitely from my own story, is that there's a lot of resistance or getting in my own way, and people getting in their own way of not allowing themselves to show up and to share their value and to recognize what the points of transformation they have gone through or the things they have achieved that they can add to other people's lives that are trying to do the same.
Yeah. It's huge.
Mm.
It's we overlook our greatest gifts. If you're not in the phase of actually owning your nectar, then you're overlooking your greatest gift. You're overlooking your greatest business opportunity, your greatest impact opportunity, your greatest opportunity to live a happy and fulfilled and successful life. You're overlooking it,
Mm.
right? If you're not living in your nectar, that's what you're doing. And the sooner, the faster, the quicker that you can get aligned with that, the faster that you're going to alleviate yourself from that pain, that pain of unfulfillment, that pain of disconnection, the pain of knowing that there's more for you to do, and the quicker you're going to get aligned with your purpose.
Mm.
And it's so important. It's so important that we take ownership for our gifts and the journeys that we've been on. And that's really how we serve. It's really how we serve at the deepest levels.
You said before there was it only takes a few questions, but are there certain poignant questions that you'd pose to people to really start digging and identifying that for themselves?
Yeah. Who am I? What is there for me to do? The latest iteration is what does it feel like for me to have it?
Mm-hmm.
Who am I? What is there for me to do? And what does it feel like for me to have it in my life?
Yeah.
I think those are the, biggest things, but I have several processes, right? So if you're interested in learning about processes, definitely a great place to follow me is like I live on Facebook. If you go, to my, if you go to @Bucky ONeill on Facebook, I'm always adding value in there. I have a group called The Secrets of Soulful Entrepreneurship. It's a great place to add value or to check that out and learn more about that. But at the end of the day, if you're not asking yourself that question of who you are and what is there for you to do in the world, then you're living out someone else's vision for yourself. You're living out someone else's vision of humanity. You're just working a job. You're doing what you were told to do. You were doing what was normal in your hometown. And it's a very difficult place. You can settle for that. And for some people, that's fine. That's a good life for them. And for other people, that is a huge disconnect. And if that's you, big question is this: who am I? What do I want to do? And then find some processes that gives you some texture into really experience. I mean, one of the things that I did when I was really young, that I was really fortunate to do, when I was about 19 years old, I went to Singapore for the very first time. And that, for me, that level of travel to a world that was so different than everything I've ever experienced was life-changing for me, right? It was life-changing because it shifted the paradigm. And as soon as I shifted the paradigm once, I realized that it was just a paradigm. Right? When you see an entire way of living, interacting, speaking, eating, communicating, the whole thing, when you see an entire different way of existing, you realize that, wait a minute, this is not a singular thing, right? Like the paradigms that I have, the rules that I have around life, it's not a singular, there is no singular truth, but it is a choice. It's a conditioning. It's the things that I was brought up in, and everybody's brought up different, right? But the choice is where the power is, and understanding that I get to choose how I live and how I express. And beyond that, that something's already actually been chosen for me. And part of my work is to align with what that is so that that can unfold and express in my life.
And that's where the joy, the ease, the creativity comes into it. And yes, it's challenging. There's pain, but it's not a slog. It's not out of obligation or to pay the bills. It's just your expression.
Again, the biggest pain is going to come from you not getting out of your own way. Okay. When people talk about flow, this is what they're talking about. All right. They're talking about accessing that nectar in your life. Getting into flow state is about accessing that nectar in their life. How do I have infinite energy? How does magic happen? How does the law of attraction, all of a sudden, all these things orchestrate outside of my ability to actually do it? And here it is. Where does that come from? That comes from alignment. Okay. Your alignment to your internal nectar. All right. The biggest challenge, the most difficult thing that you're going to do is to fight yourself out of flow, fight yourself out of alignment. Okay. Why is not we all have those moments, right? And I had those moments too, right? Life works this way. It's like nothing's working in my life. Why? Because there's a misalignment and life is speaking to you and saying, hey, nothing's working. Ask a better question. Nothing's working. Ask a better question. Do something different. Yeah. All life is trying to do is to get you to trim tab.
Yeah.
That's what life is trying to do. Life is giving you the feedback so that you can trim tab, so that you can live in your aligned nectar and flow state, which is abundant, which is excitement, which is joy, which is power, which is passion, which is expression, which is ease. And yes, there's going to be challenges. Yes, there's going to be up and down. Nothing's going to be as you expected. And this is the fucked up part about it, right? Nothing be as but I need it to be as I expected. Now I got a little bit of flow. Now it's going to do this. And when it doesn't do this, oh shit. Yeah. Like nothing is going to be how you expected it to be. By the very nature of growth and expansion, it's never going to be what you expected. If you knew what it was going to be, it wouldn't be growth, right? It wouldn't be expansion. The nature of expansion is the unknown, right? But what we try to do because of fear and because of doubt and because of all these things is we try to hold on to these things and we try to keep it small so that we can control it.
Yes.
And it's actually when we get out of control that we are, in most times, depending on the definition of what you're talking about, in or out of control, it's when we let go of the control, when we release, when we imagine the river flow is also like a river, right? And we're either swimming against the stream or we're floating. Mm-hmm. Or we're swimming with the current.
Yeah.
Right? These are the distinctions. Where you're getting exhausted, where you're challenged, where it's really difficult is when you're swimming upstream. I don't feel like I'm going anywhere. Nothing's working in my life. I'm feeling exhausted. I'm feeling stressed out. My relationships suck. I hate my job. Yeah. I know I could be doing more, but I'm not. You're swimming upstream, bro. Right? And there becomes you get to a point of consciousness where you just release and say, okay, cool. I'm just going to surrender. And maybe it's in one area, maybe it's in all areas. I'm just going to surrender. I'm going to allow myself to float. And I'm going to let this take me exactly where it needs to take me. And then there comes another point where you're like, okay, I feel this. I get what's going on. I got to get the energy. And now I'm going to start swimming. I'm going to start swimming with that flow. I'm going to start following that flow. I'm going to start chasing that flow. I'm going to start aligning with that flow every single day. And there becomes a rapid ascension in our lives.
Yes.
But that practice and that metaphor is ongoing. We're always going to be tested in those ways. We're always going to be tested.
That's huge at letting go of. And I feel that letting go process is that wave of life is it's a constant flux of catching yourself attaching and the need for control and then letting it go again. And then catching yourself in another area, detaching like a leech and letting it go again. And it's that, fuck man, that's a fun game to be playing into and just to catch yourself every time is like, God damn, I caught myself again.
Yeah.
Let it go.
Yeah. Yeah. And there'll be major shifts for all of us. There'll be moments where the evolution of that is like, before I even attached, I let it go.
Yeah.
And I condition myself so much to let it go that I'm just in the space of letting it go.
Yeah.
And then again, fast forward, it's like, let me align and actually let me move in direction.
Yeah.
Let me move in direction. And this is why, again, those practices, those coming back to centers, those coming back to home are so important because it brings you into that internal compass. I was over at Griffith Park, if you guys know the Hollywood sign and Griffith Observatory in LA.
Yeah, cool.
I was over there today and this morning, and I just sat there and did like a 20-minute meditation. And for me, that was one of the things. You can get so busy, right? With the kids, with the family, with all the personal stuff, the misses, everything. The businesses, you can get so busy, right? But your ability to take the time to come back home changes everything, changes your ability to move in anything, to create in everything. It's so important. And again, I know that this conversation is really about world-class transformations and how do you do that. But what we're talking about is the essence of transformation. Yeah. It's how you produce or actualize something in your life, actualize something from nothing. Transformation is not necessarily, a 180, but it's actualizing something from nothing. It's how did this thing that was once this thing now turn into this thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I love that. Like, you can hold your hand out and you have a seed on there and you ask, like, what do you see? And you say, I see a seed. Someone with a bit more foresight might say, I see a tree. Someone might say, I see a forest or a city or, the whole world. And it is like that, like you said, the trim tab, it starts with a seed and from the tiniest, was it Deming who was all about systemizing in the first 15% of your process equals the 90% of your outcomes, or the 80-20 kind of principle as well. Sure. But yeah, you sort of focus on that very start point and hone that in, and the rest of it is just sort of, you get into that flow state, it just happens. But I want to share as well. What was it? Oh no, I lost it. I was going to share something with you and get your opinion on it, but it's basically about a letting go process. Oh yeah, that's right. So one of the biggest weights that I think I've ever felt let go of was writing down all the things that I thought I wanted, all my ambitions, all my goals, and then going through this letting go process and doing some deep work around traumas and this and that and the other. Like, that was heavy, but when I was able to let go of those desires and those ambitions, and just trust that they were out there and not need to hold on to them as something that I was carrying around like a mission to try and achieve, it blew me away at the level of just lightness within me of going through that letting go process. And so, yeah, it's almost like we're telepathic at the moment. You just keep talking. I have questions come up with you and you just keep answering them. And it's a beautiful process to witness as well. It's that inner dialogue of what's going on outside of us is inside of us as well. But yeah, that letting go process, I think, has, at least lately, been one of the biggest epiphanies for me and mind-blowing experiences to go through and to start practicing. But can you share a bit about that? Oh, that's right. Now it's come to me. So what I was really confused with for a while there was listening to speakers or people that I looked up to talk about setting really clear goals, having really clear things to focus on. Right. And then other ones talking to me about just being in the present moment. It's all about being in the here and the now. And so there was this disalignment. And for a long time, it baffled me, like they're both speaking so eloquently about both sides that they're conflicting. But then when I went through that letting go process, it just hit me. I was like, all right, let's get super clear on whatever it is, the nectar out there. So you've got something to work towards. At least it just keeps you in action. But then once you've got that, you just let go of that and be in the present moment and just watch it unfold and just be daily. Be. Yeah. And, so is that where how you align those as well, like the future planning being business orientated and lifestyle design orientated compared to and coupling it with being in the moment?
Well, I think it depends on what scale that you're talking about, right? I think from a personal development standpoint, a little bit different than the business standpoint, because in a business, there's strategies and there's structures that you always have to put in place in order to get to certain outcomes, right? So, if I say, by this week, I want to make sure that I have this thing set up in order to be able to produce that outcome, that's one thing. From a personal development standpoint, where you're saying, okay, cool, when we first spoke, we spoke about the stairs. And I think one of the things that people need in a lot of ways is that they need a tangible structure of something physical that they're actually looking to manifest, because a lot of ways that's how people are designed. They're trained to think that, hey, you know what, my success, right, is going to come from my level of achievement. And as I achieve something, I'm going to feel a level of success. So from a very beginner standpoint, I think it's really important to have those things. I think there's a difference between having desires, having goals versus having a vision for your life. I think a vision is a little bit more, it's a kind of like a more of a happy balance in between that. A vision doesn't necessarily come from, hey, what are the things that I want? It's a combination of those two things of who am I and what am I connected to and what is source telling me, right? It's almost like, going to Walkabout Vision Quest, is that there's things that are beyond your understanding that are coming forward, right? And during that time, there's a discovery that's taking place. And, I think when people are first getting started, like I said before, it's important for them to have that baseline of, this is what it's going to take in order to produce results. This is a level of dedication. This is a level of discipline. This is a level of consistency. I spoke about this earlier today too, when I was talking about, becoming a speaker. The foundational pieces of discipline, the discipline of working your way through the steps, of working things into, completion, of getting over the obstacles. Those are foundational pieces for high levels of life manifestation. And without that, it becomes really difficult to move through any process, whether that's one of an intuitive sense or letting go of all the external outcomes and choosing ourselves. There's still a process that is that you have to be dedicated to, that is still like step by step. It's still like, hey, you know what? I'm working this thing through. I'm staying consistent with the things that I know to do. I'm going to get over the obstacles. I'm letting go of those things. It's like that level of practice. I essentially think that they're talking about the same thing, but with a different outcome in mind and a different stage of evolution that's taking place.
Where does mastery come into that with respect to your nectar or your modality, your medium, your art form? Does that just come from alignment as well? Like you really tapping into, who am I? What do I want to do? Recognize
your mastery.
Yeah.
Your mastery comes your ability to constantly, the who am I question is really, it's one that's characterizing the entire process, right? But it's really a beginning question. One of the things that you ask is, where do I start? What's the question that I ask, right? In order to like shift some things. So you're always going to come back to that. That's going to be your home. Okay. Mastery comes from your ability to follow that through. And in your ability to follow that through, there's all kinds of things that come with it, right? So I'll give you the example of speaking. I knew for the longest time that I was going to be a speaker. I knew it because that's what I was born into. That's what I was going to do. And then the other piece was, but I had to go through stages of that, from observing it to being a mentor, right? A youth mentor. And then becoming a professional speaker and then traveling all over the world, putting 13 years in, staying consistent in that process is what brought me to a level of mastery, right? Staying consistent in that passion, in that nectar is what brought me to a level of mastery. I never could imagine that I would be in the place that I am today, but it's literally from, professionally, it started in 2000. From 2000 to 2019, I've been in this work professionally.
Yeah.
And all kinds of challenges, all kinds of learning, all kinds of discovery. Yes. But what was I committed to? I was committed to this vision. I was committed to this outcome, right? Not so much the goals, right? The goals were great. Like, I want to become a facilitator. I want to become a lead facilitator. I want to speak all over the world. I want to live in different countries. I want to create an events company. I want to make X amount of dollars. Those were all things that drove me and kept me moving forward along this path. But the mastery came as a byproduct of all that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And this is what I mean for a lot of people when they're growing businesses, when they're first getting started, and when they're talking about transformation and all this kind of stuff. Your ability to transform people's lives come directly from your mastery. And if you're not leading in your mastery, then your shot at transformation is going to be a far one, because the ability to transform somebody has to directly do with your ability to break down the process that you went through. So how am I able to develop speakers? Right? Because I have a breakdown of a process that I went through over the last 20 years. How do I know how do I transform people's life on a personal level? Because I have a breakdown of a process that went through my entire life. Yeah. I have a breakdown of a process. How do I grow businesses, specifically transformational business, one-on-one coaching, group programs, and live events? Because I have a breakdown of a process that I've been in for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Right? This is not just some shit that I was like, oh, this is a really cool thing that I want to do.
Yeah.
Right? And it wasn't until that I actually owned my expertise or my mastery that I was actually able to effectively monetize it. Right? We all have a level of mastery because we all have a life experience. Right? We are all professional doers and masters in certain things. And again, it's going to be tied to a lot of times it's tied to our nectar, but where does our nectar come from? Our nectar is birthed from our traumas. Our nectar is birthed from our challenges. We get to realize what our nectar is because of the challenges that we face. It's what qualifies us. It's what inspires us, right? It's like, a lot of people say from a very esoteric perspective is that, we chose this life, We chose this life. We chose this dynamic. We chose this circumstance. And the game that we're playing as human beings or as souls in the human experience is this game of, self-actualization and self-realization, right? The self beyond the conditioned self, beyond the physical form. But how do I get into a self-realization from a soul perspective? And that we've all lived many life, and this is just the next iteration of it. And that we're choosing to play this game where we have all this stuff, all this mask, all this layers that's stacked upon us. And part of our work is as a soul is to self-realize and to self-actualize and to be in the truest expression of who we are from a soul's perspective. That's the work, man. That's what transformation is. And really what you're doing as a transformational guide on any level is that you're helping people in that process in the ways that you've helped yourself. Yeah. You're helping people in that process in the step-by-step ways that you've helped yourself. Right? But in order to do that, you have to be willing to go into those stories, go into those traumas, go into those challenges, identify the expertise, break it down step by step, understand the processes so that you can effectively guide people. And there's levels to this, right? This is why, if you're just getting started, you're always going to start one-on-one. A lot of people want to start in courses. You're not qualified to start in a course if you've never done one-on-one. Right? Because your expertise is not at that level where you can leverage your process yet. You don't even know what your process is. Right? So you go one-on-one into some type of leverage course or group and then into live events. Because in live events, it's just more, you have to be a little sharper, right? You have to be a little bit more astute because it's real time. Everything's happening in real time. And yes, you can craft and design, but everything's happening and being orchestrated in real time. In a course or a thing you have, in a group training program, you have different elements that you can manipulate where time is not the factor. Right? Time is not the factor, but when things are happening in real time, you're going to transform your life in 3 days as compared to transform your life in 8 weeks. It's a big difference, right?
So for people that are, I guess, at that precipice of really aligning with their nectar, but yet are stepping into that field as a newbie in that field, you speak on that with respect to their experience as being their mastery as opposed to their expertise being the mastery at that point, because I see that again, that was a challenge for me to overcome and see in a lot of people as well, where they hold themselves back or they're in their own way because they've got that imposter syndrome. They don't, like, why would they come to me instead of someone that's been in the industry for 20 years, but yet they've got their experience.
Here's the thing, that they wouldn't come to you if they wouldn't come to you. If you're competing with people who have been in the industry for the last 20 years, then you're in the wrong lane. Okay. The thing is that we think that we need to compete with people in the industry, right? No one's competing with me. Nobody, right? Because nobody has my experience the way that I have it. When I position myself based on my experience, then there is no competition. When I position it based on my expertise, public speaking, now there's a huge amount of competition.
Can you elaborate on that?
Sure.
The positioning.
Okay. So the positioning is huge. It's a really important thing. And this is a bigger conversation, right? So this is one of these things that if you're interested in this conversation, definitely get into the group. We run a program called Monetize Your Passion that goes step by step in this work. But it's a huge thing. First of all, you have to be able to identify your experience. Okay. And then position your expertise as your experience. If you lead with quote unquote your general expertise, I'm a public speaker, I'll teach you how to be a public speaker. There's lots of people that can do that. But your unique story, your unique experience, who it's for, why public speaking, if it's public speaking, and how that correlates to the demographic that you serve, specifically the problem that they're facing, and the ways that you can serve them based on your experience, that becomes an entirely different market, becomes an entirely different focus, becomes an entirely different offer, an entirely different business. And it will differentiate you dramatically from the competition. Everyone wants to go, the tendency is to go to the competition. This is about going within yourself and differentiating yourself from the competition by owning what your experience is, if that makes sense.
Can you give an example of someone that you've worked with, or even yourself, that has, again, like obviously public speaking is one, but compared to your experience, can you give an example of?
Think about all the general categories: business coach, life coach, healer, health expert, wellness professional. Think about all the general, personal trainer. Okay. Think about all the general categories. you can become another one of those. You can become another life coach. You become another business coach, right? And first of all, your title directly has to be in line with what your experience is, first of all. So if if you don't have a vast experience of life, you can't necessarily call yourself a life coach, right? If you don't have a vast experience of business, you can't call yourself a business coach, unless there's a specific thing based on your experience that you're speaking to that is in the realm of life. But in general, you wouldn't necessarily use that same title, right? What you have to find is you have to find your niche within that space and create a new industry for yourself, a new focus for yourself. And you need to focus on what that market is, regardless of where you're at in your timeline, right? Regardless of where you're at in your timeline, there's always a space of expertise if you're willing to look at it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's profound. I love it. And something that I've been pondering myself and trying to nut out as well. So that's given me food for thought. And I'm super keen to jump into the program with you and Leah as well. In the not too distant future. So I'm excited about that and been digesting a lot of your content since we caught up just a couple of weeks ago for the first time. So I'm very grateful. Is there any sort of last message or something that you'd really like to leave people with, just to sort of leave them floating on air and something to think about for the day?
Yeah, I think this was a really big conversation. It was a little bit different than what I expected, and it was probably a little bit different than what you expected. But I think the nature of transformation is the things that we've talked about today. And I think from a personal standpoint, that outline is there. I think from an orchestration or business standpoint, that outline is there. But the point is that if you want to create transformation for people, you have to realize the baseline of what transformation is and what that looks like. And as an individual, the greatest thing that I can say for anybody who's watching this, or anybody who's starting a business or who's looking to create more transformation in their own life, is find your nectar, have a relentless pursuit for your nectar, be willing to let go of all the planning, all the organization, all the logic, all the reason within your life, and allow yourself just to unfold in the beautiful expression of who you are, and to trust your intuition and to follow it, let it be your guide, and know that life is working for you and that you're being led to a specific outcome, even when it doesn't look like that, even when it looks like, man, this is messed up, or this is really challenging, this is really difficult. The truest compass in your life is your center. It's your intuition. It's your internal knowing, and your ability to trust that, to follow that, is what is going to lead to the greatest and truest and the fullest expression of who you are. All your goals, all your dreams, all your visions and beyond are going to derive from that place. And your willingness to do that is what's going to allow you to be the greatest impact, the greatest business owner, the greatest person, the greatest family member, the greatest individual, the greatest expression. Right? It is the essence of your joy. It is the essence of your success. It's the essence of your fulfillment. Everything starts there. Okay. So that's what I would leave people with, is just have a relentless pursuit for that. Relentless, like nothing comes above that. There is no compromising in that. There is nothing that is greater of value to you in your life than your ability to do that. Doesn't mean that in fact, it does mean that your entire life is going to change multiple times over. And just know that that's a part of the joy. That's a part of the beauty of it all. That's a part of, that's a part of really living, in my opinion. And if there was one thing that I could say to everybody, like, there's nothing greater than to do that work.
Fantastic. Bucky, thank you so much, brother.
Yeah, you got it, man.
Guys, thank you for joining us for another awesome episode. And Bucky, check Bucky out. Where's the best place? A few places they can check you out.
The best place, if you just go to my my Facebook handle at Bucky ONeill, BuckyOneill, predominantly on Facebook. Okay, so I'm moving into Instagram, but predominantly on Facebook. If you want to find me and the things that I'm doing and things that I'm up to date, the programs that I got going on or where I'm speaking, Facebook is the place, at Bucky ONeill. Few different pages there, but definitely excited to have you. And send me a message on there. If you have a question, if something comes up for you, if you're like, man, I was so inspired by the thing that you said, or whatever it is, send me a message. I'm always happy to connect and reach out and to make sure that, I'm serving people. Again, it's my greatest purpose to do so, and also my greatest honor to do so. So the more that you reach out, the more I'm happy to serve.
Fantastic. Reach out, guys. Looking forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thank you so much. Check out our sponsors. Check out the Trim Tab Transformation Foundation, the projects they're up to, and we'll see you next time.
Right on, brother. Appreciate you guys.